Welcome, everybody. This is your host, Gus Van Dender. I am the founder of Cnnected. And what we do is we help you figure out ways to bring your people closer together so they communicate and collaborate better. And basically elevating their experience as an employee or a member of your association or any group of people that you're bringing together. Today, we have our guest, Chris, here. Chris is the founder, managing partner, I should say, of Launch House. Did I say that correct?
You did.
Awesome. Why don't you add some flavor to that? Because I would do this the wrong way and do you a disservice. Because there's so much. I looked you up and like there's so much going on that I don't even know what to point out and what to feature.
Yeah, well, you featured the one thing. So I am the co-founder and managing partner of Launch House. We hold a portfolio of assets. We have a handful of portfolio companies that are in technology or in e-commerce brands. We manage a couple of live event brands that are proprietary to us. And then we have an opportunity zone fund that we are part of that invests in businesses and in real estate development projects in qualified opportunity zones. So, in a nutshell, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been building businesses for 19 some odd years now. I have gone 0 to 20 million in revenues. I can't remember now, maybe 6 or 7 times. 3 of those have been glorious fireballs of lessons or failure or things like, in other words, they imploded. A couple of those have exited, and then I can't even tell you how many small little projects or things we've invested in over the years. It's in the dozens, if not 100 plus by now. So
that's crazy.
What you would call a serial entrepreneur. I don't have too many hobbies outside of
just building businesses. Yeah, and that's what I noticed too, and the reason I invited you to come on the show is like your LinkedIn profile is literally like pages. Like I just kept scrolling through everything that you had done. I'm like, wow, this guy has had like 3 lives or something. Like it's more than what, people would be able to pull off in a couple of lifetimes. So I was very intrigued, and I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of people, a lot of hiring, firing, culture, and that's what I wanted to talk about today and get your perspective on that. Right. Yep. So if you're ready to go, I'll start with the first question.
Let's fire it up. Yeah.
So when company culture has been for a little while now, but it's this buzzword now, right? I hear it everywhere, and I'm sure it means something different for everybody. So that's my first question to you. When I say company culture, what does that mean to you? What comes up?
The best way I define company culture after experience of all kinds of versions of it is it's nothing more than group habit.
Group habit.
The example that we could give is it's always the other guy with the accent. Right? Like I notice I'm not sure if it almost sounds maybe Serbian or so, I'm not sure where your heritage is from, but I hear an accent. Now maybe you hear one in me. Mm-hmm. It's always the other person that has it. And yep. So when we think about culture inside of companies, inherently implied in that is when we say the word culture, most people are thinking of something good, meaning like I have a good culture. Mm-hmm. The reality is culture is. There's no such thing as good culture, bad culture. There is your culture. And mm-hmm. Your culture is nothing more than group habit, meaning what are the habits of the collective people that show up, suit up, and go to work in your business every single day? And are they producing the results you want? Because every company can relate to that. Every company has that.
That's an interesting perspective. Just to answer your question, the accent is actually fake. I do that because it sparks conversation around culture. No, I'm just kidding. I'm from Belgium originally.
Belgium. I knew it was somewhere in like Europe, in that Baltics or Europe somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is also why I'm so obsessed with culture, is because for the first 30 years of my life, I lived in one culture, right? Then I moved to the United States and got exposed to a different culture, but it was in a very strange way, right? And oftentimes I think about if I had moved to Africa and all of a sudden I was the only white guy in a village, they would know that I was from a different culture. But because I looked the same, people expected me to act the same. And to your point, right, have the same group habits, but I didn't, right? I grew up in a whole different culture, had different habits. And it was this weird, like, wait a second, who is this guy? Like, he's acting weird. He looks like an American, but he isn't, right? And then the accent obviously always, revealed it very quickly. But it's a good point, and I'm a testament to that. Just inside of my experience, coming here, looking the same, but having very, very, very different habits because of the group of people that I was surrounded with as I was growing up. So that's a beautiful perspective that I haven't heard too often. But you're dead on, I think. So my next question inside of that is, in your organizations, right, and there's many of them, what have you seen as an example of good or bad culture? I know you said there isn't good or bad, but it does have an effect on your organization, though. Like, right, when culture goes sideways, right? When you're trying to build a specific culture and it's not that is showing up, like, give us some examples of what you've seen has negative or positive effects on the organization.
Yeah, well, and I said what I said earlier to make a point that until we invoke the law of relativity, everything just is, right? Culture is when we say the word generically or in the buzzword sense, most we're trying to think of some positive thing, meaning they're biased towards it is good. Or culture is something I'm missing. And I'm just making the point that culture is not something you're missing. Culture is something you have either by design or by default.
Yep.
So the things that I've seen, create positive results or negative results, because ultimately when we say we have a bad culture, we're almost like going through the term culture into the result.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, you could have a bad result and still have a great culture, because your culture could be friendly and it could be inviting and it could be that, but it could be focused on the wrong business metrics. Like, it could be focused on making everybody feel good. And so everybody feels good inside your culture. Everybody feels like family, but you're going out of business. Conversely to that, right?
You're not producing anything.
Yeah. Conversely to that, everyone could, kind of have a little bit of fear, a little bit of trepidation, maybe, maybe not always feel comfortable and be a little bit on their heels, but sometimes those cultures create really good results in the economic sense, right? And or in the design sense. And so everybody's, studied Steve Jobs ad nauseum, and, he's a genius and he's also a maniac, right? Like, there's people that respect what was achieved at Apple, but that culture certainly wasn't for everybody. And so it doesn't mean, there's just different folks for different things, right? And so, typically when you're designing something from the ground up, the founders, the reason why they wanted to start the business, one of the reasons is because not only the solution in the marketplace maybe they felt like was missing, but maybe the way, right? The vehicle by which that marketplace was being served was wrong, i.e. culture. So they set up to go create a company that does it right.
Yeah.
Well, again, does it right in whose mind? Does it right in their mind? And that's fine. That's great. That's our right as human beings that are in free markets to go do it our way, even if it's the same solution set that someone else does. So I guess, sorry about that. I'm not sure.
That's all right. We get some special effects here. It's always good.
I don't even know what that bell is. I have no idea. So I don't think it's my computer, but it might be, for all I know. Something I turn on. So anyway, to answer your question, I think one of the things that I've noticed and where to look is why I say it's group habit is because it's the way that we organize around which things we value, right? And in high performance cultures where performance is valued over, say, other things like niceties or pleasantries, then the people that have a habit of forming around performance tend to get along. And the people that don't, right, tend to not get along.
Mm-hmm.
And there's friction.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing in cultures that value the niceties and the pleasantries prior to performance, right? It's like that usually drives the type A aggressive type out.
Yep.
But the bottom line is human beings always revert to habit in times of stress. So why I bring that up is because if you really want to know what your culture is, it's not on a diagram. It's not on your posters on the wall. It's not on the t-shirts that you wear. It is what happens when crap hits the fan.
Mm-hmm. You can say shit. It's okay.
Well, I usually do, but I'm not saying for I usually do, but I'm saying crap because I don't want to miss the point. It's
no, I get it.
The emphasis isn't on how I describe it as much as the fact that most of us don't really know what our culture is, and we're trying to avoid that thing that we don't want to have happen. And the reality is that adversity exposes character, and therefore adversity exposes the habit of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore that habit then dictates that's your actual culture.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful perspective. And I think what I'm hearing too is that you're kind of alluding to this idea that we see certain companies, right, like Google and Netflix and Apple, and that is the culture that everybody's striving to, right, to have. But that is not necessarily what would fit inside of your organization with your values, right, that you brought up, and the things that you want to attract. So I see how that can negatively or positively affect your output if you're trying to like fit people inside of a box that is not your box, right? So that also makes more sense now when you say good culture, bad culture, it doesn't matter. It is whatever you need to create to deliver the values that you subscribe to, and then attracting employees is a fit or it's not a fit. Like just in like friendships or any relationship, right? You get along or you don't get along. There's no real in between. So I think that's a good analogy there.
These examples are everywhere, but one that'll polarize any of the American audience listening to this. And I say this because I'm not a Patriots fan, but I am a Cowboys fan. And so for people who watch, NFL, you hate me either way. But the reality is that like both of those teams are the top two from a value standpoint. If you look at the value of teams, those two teams are the most valuable teams in the NFL.
Yeah. And
yet one of them has absolutely done something that no team in the history of any sport, maybe except for the New Zealand All Blacks, has been able to achieve, which in the era of free agency, in the era of all this, money and people leaving teams and this and that, holding on to talent has been a challenge. And yet, everyone will say, well, it's because of Brady or because of Belichick or what have you. And the reality is it's because of the culture that those two have embodied. And you could argue that Belichick, like him or hate him, has kind of mandated, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's top down and bottom up, meaning it's everyone buying in, from the owners to what have you. And the reason why I bring that up is not to debate whether they're the greatest team or not. It's to say that why what they've done is different than other teams that have won multiple Super Bowls, which is the pinnacle of that business.
Yep.
Because they've done it inside of adversity, meaning, to make my other point clearer, when someone gets suspended for 4 games or hurt for 4 games, or they lose a star player, or someone like their tight end retires, like nothing changes with what they consider to be the acceptable outcome of a season.
Mm-hmm.
For them, down to the cellular level, winning the championship is the acceptable outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other teams that say all the same things, right? Like the team is bigger than me, winning the Super Bowl is our goal, but they don't they don't have that result and they don't embody it. And so that's when you see it stand out. And that's why, whether it's Southwest Airlines, whether it's, I mean, you pick your favorite company that we all idolize for culture, it's what happens when, you know, things go bad. And so again, just some examples to keep it simple. So I think the lesson is, you know, if I'm looking at my company, whether it's 20,000 people or whether it's 2 people in a garage trying to become the next thing, how I communicate, which I know is kind of what you help organizations do, is part of it. But again, it's the values that are simple and that are and that are embodied by every person, regardless of their background. And do we organize around those, and do we value them in spirit, even when the easy choice is to abandon them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's a great point, Chris. And you know what's funny about what came up to me when you say about culture comes out in adversity, right? When I get mad, that's when my different languages come out again, right? I dream in English, so English is my first language. But when I am in a position of stress, right, oftentimes French comes out or Flemish comes out. It's a very interesting point that you make, because I experience it myself sometimes, and I think that's an example of that.
Our subconscious mind is, you know, the best example of a book that everyone should read if they haven't read it. It's probably 60 years old now. Yeah, almost 60 years old. It's called Psycho-Cybernetics, written by Maxwell Maltz. And I'm
reading it now.
I've reread it, I think, 3 or 4 times over the last 15 years. And
you
know, and this whole notion of, you know, the first moon landing was off track 97% of the time.
Yeah.
Why it landed within a fraction of a second of when Werner von Braun said it would is because it knew where it was going, and it never changed that fixed point. And our minds are set up that way. Yep. And sometimes we don't realize that, you know, our subconscious has chosen a habit or chosen an identity. And you're speaking about, you know, you start cursing in French or Flemish. It's not like you sat there consciously and said, when I curse, I'm going to do it in my old tongue. It's that when we were 0 to 5, before this lid got put on where we started to be reasonable and make choices, we were programmed with a bunch of stuff. And organizations are that way too, right? So those first 0 to 20 employees, those first 0 to 6 years, whether you choose it or you don't, in spite of everything else you're trying to accomplish, you're basically like a newborn child going up to age 5, and you are programming what's acceptable, what's not. Mm-hmm. And whether you speak it or whether you just do it, that scales.
Yep.
And so that's something, you know, to think about. Now, if you're a larger organization, unfortunately, changing that typically means that you're going to have to be reborn in some way, organizational wide. And that's hard to achieve with silos, but it's been accomplished. There's been organizations that have done it. Usually they've come out of bankruptcy or some kind of reorganization, and there's been some mandate to drive performance, and someone's gotten a green light to do it. And they've, you know, one of my favorite frameworks that I'll give a free plug to is Steve Farber's stuff. If you haven't read Radical Leap, it's a must read. Leap, acronym for a leadership framework that essentially helps you establish culture. Love, energy, audacity, and proof is what Leap stands for. And there's been numerous middle market and billion-dollar examples. And also school systems that have implemented Leap as a simple framework to rally people around and create a new outcome for their culture. So
yeah,
I'll give my buddy Farber a free plug today.
There you go. That's awesome. And it actually leads me into my last question around things that you have done and implemented to improve company culture, or to change, I should say, company culture. I mean, this is probably one of them. Do you have any other examples that you want to share with our listeners or viewers?
Well, you know, and this is about self-awareness too. What I've realized is my greatest strengths, just like most people, are your greatest vulnerabilities potentially. And so, you know, the culture at Launch House is this kind of resilient, persistent, you know, entrepreneurial DNA, like just eat adversity for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, spit it out with a smile.
Mm-hmm.
And, we bet on the jockey, not the horse, meaning like, give me a great idea, but not someone who I think is bulletproof, and I probably won't invest in it. Give me a mediocre idea, but someone who has demonstrated they've had their teeth kicked in and they come back, and I'll probably, do something with that person, because to me, that's embodying our culture.
Yeah.
Which is much more leans towards the jockey, not the horse kind of thing, because I just have found that if I find the right jockey, there's a lot of horses out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you never can really control whether the horse is going to race that day or fall down or break its leg or get sick. But you kind of, and that's just our bias. So why I bring all that up is, in full candor, I purposely don't sit on top of, personally, where I have to manage. I don't sit on top of large organizations of people because I don't really do well managing them. It's just a skill set I don't have. I've identified after 19 years that I'm a great kind of leader guy. I'm a great, set the tone guy. I'm a great do it, lead by example. I'll be the first guy on the field, first person, last person off type of thing. But I have that expectation of myself. At one point, I thought that I had that expectation of other people, meaning I was willing to manage to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a deep side of empathy too. And I realized that part of it was just the way I was raised. I realized that, what works for me doesn't necessarily work for everybody else. So where I got myself in trouble leading organizations along, the years when things didn't work out, was that in my mind, without realizing it, I would expect people to do what I would do. But I wouldn't manage them to it because I wouldn't want myself to be managed to it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't know this at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, one of the things that I've learned is, as a leader, whether you're in the C-suite or whether you're leading a team, you kind of have to understand the standard you set for yourself and then how much of a self-starter you are. What I've noticed is people that are self-starters that don't need someone cracking the whip don't like to crack the whip on others. Because if someone starts cracking the whip on me, I get annoyed.
Yep.
I'm like, no one's going to outwork me.
Because you don't operate that way.
However, good managers typically have the ability to do that and inspire that kind of work ethic in people that otherwise wouldn't work that way. But usually I don't want to say they don't have it themselves. It's just that they don't mind having it cracked on them. Because sometimes they need it. And so, again, a lot of this is self-awareness. And if you're found, it depends on who we're talking to here, but if you're talking about someone who's starting a company, an entrepreneur, you really have to understand whether you're the self-starter, the leader who, expects it, but quietly expects it and gets disappointed when they don't, but is never going to manage to it because you care about people too much. And I'm not saying that people that manage to it don't care about people. I'm saying that's what I found, is that it's not about that. I get frustrated myself that it's almost like I'm too easy on people because I don't want to not be. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I'm ridiculously brutal on myself, but it's almost because I can take it.
Yeah.
So again, some of these things are really just nuances of, you got to understand your leadership style, and certain people are better off in a structure where, whether it's investment or whatever, where they sit on top of a bunch of portfolio companies and they have 5 or 6 jockeys that they talk about all day long with everybody, but everything else gets managed by other people.
Yep.
I.e., that's my world.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are ones who want to build and sit on top of one organization that scales, and they do it with executive teams, and that's fine. That's what's worked for me, but it's taken me, a while to figure that out.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you for your input today. I'm gonna wrap it up with a bit of a summary. I feel like we could talk about this for hours, but I think we're gonna put our listeners to sleep, not because it's not interesting, but because our attention spans are so short right now. I wanna keep it short and quick. So let me kind of summarize what we discussed and what you brought up today. Right? When we talked about culture, you said culture means group habits for me, which I think makes total sense, right? It's the environment where you grew up in, from your family to your extended family to your village, so to speak. You're adopting habits, and that's what creates culture, right? And a good example of that is language, right? Because you speak that language because that's what your parents told you, right?
That was your normal.
Exactly. That becomes your normal. And so then we went over into how it affects an organization. And you talked about how it's all about values, really, and making sure that those habits match the values that you want to create, right? Or you want to put out, or you want to be known for, right? So there's, in that sense, there is no right or wrong culture. It is just the culture that exists. And if that matches the values that you stand for, then you're good to go, right? And then you will attract.
You know, and if it matches the values, and if it gets you the result.
Exactly. Yep. Because that's all that matters. Like, if you want to be chill and you don't care about revenue, then great, create that culture and just be all lazy and be okay with that, right? That's really what it comes down to.
Well, it's not. I think the thing is there's a lot of things in the world that are binary, and I think wins and losses are binary. But a lot of times we go right to binary on everything. And
yep.
Talking about culture is not a binary thing. There are results.
It's alive, right?
There's results we need to map to. We need to map to a financial performance that's going to allow us to continue to do what we do. Otherwise, that business is going to be gone, and we're going to have to go get another job or start another business, right? So there are financial performances that we can map culture to and say, are we winning or losing as it relates to how our culture is positively impacting the financial performance? Then there's the way that people feel about getting that. If every time that I get the win, I want to quit the game, then I'm getting one result because of the culture I have, but I'm burning myself out and my people out. And so I'm like, again, to summarize it, the game is, and I call it a game because to me, it's the ultimate game, right? The game of business is the ultimate day in, day out thing that we get to do for as long as we're healthy, most of our lives, right? Everything else is, you're done by the time you're 20, or you're done by the time you're 30, or your body starts to break down. But for the most people, you can play this game called business or your career or building stuff. You can play that for 40, 50 years. I know some people are just trying to check the box to get to this thing called retirement, and that's fine too. But there's still a way to enjoy that process. Even if your goal is to get to 65 and go sit on a beach and stop working and whatever, most people that have that goal still want to enjoy the journey of that 20, 30 years. They don't want to be miserable.
Yep.
So, getting the result allows us to keep playing the game. But doing it in a certain way allows us to actually not want to quit the game that's working. And I think those are the two ways to just simply look at culture, right? Am I still in the game? Great. Check that box. Do I still want to be? If not, then the culture isn't a fit. No,
exactly. Because we spend so much time inside of our business, inside of our job, versus the downtown time that we have. So, well, Chris, again, thank you. Thank you.
What I do, the last thing I'd say is why it matters to all of us at some level is because we all inherently know, whether we've done the math or not, it's the only thing that you and I do that is more than we sleep, more than we see our family, more than we vacation, more than we work out, more than we eat at restaurants. Work is the only thing you and I do for the bulk of our life, more than anything else. And culture gives us the ability to enjoy that or dread it.
Boom. That's it. That's beautiful. That's the perfect way to end our conversation. I love it. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. Everybody around this video, up, down, left, right, you're going to find Chris's information. I'll drop his a link to his website. You can also reach out to me if you have more questions about building culture or if you're struggling with that. And we will talk to you later. See ya.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Bye.